Hi, I am Eva from the Leaders of Africa Institute. We open a new program determined to amplify your voice. We all have a voice to share with the world and a strong desire to be heard. The 2-month podcast masterclass program at the Leaders of Africa Institute offers insight into sharing your voice and capturing stories that resonate with a global audience and spur action for social change. Today, we are joined by the lead instructor for the podcast masterclass program, Pecholano Ali. Pecholano has devoted his professional life to bringing stories to life, including in conflict zones across the African continent. With his Cameroonian upbringing and roots, Pecholano connects his pursuit of journalistic excellence to the betterment of the continent and giving voice to the voiceless. We are joined by Pecholano. Pecholano, welcome.
Hi, Eva. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Some communication practitioners, journalists, and business managers listening in have seen and heard about podcasts. But what exactly is a podcast and what can they help us achieve?
To avoid being too technical, I think of a podcast as an audio story that is uploaded to the internet, ideally on a podcasting platform that you can download and listen to, or you can stream on the go anywhere you are in the world, so long as you have access to the internet. On what it can help us achieve, there's just a lot that podcast can do for us, in addition to the fact that just listening to audio stories told in ways that spur not just your emotions, but your interest in causes and stories in general, it allows you to reach a larger global audience with your message, regardless of what you have to share with the world. Using podcast, you can be able to reach someone in America, someone in Kenya, someone in Tanzania, someone in Amsterdam, regardless of where you are in the world with the message that you have, so long as you have access to the internet and you're able to tell that story.
That is insightful. Can this help your organization or business?
Absolutely. Anyone who has a story to tell, whether you're a business manager, whether you are a politician, whether you are an activist, whether you work in civil service organizations, non-governmental organizations, entrepreneurs, regardless of who you are, so long as you have a story to tell, podcasts are a valuable media and platform for you to tell that story. So I like to think of it as an additional tool for people to get their business idea out there, for people to get their message across. You know, we live in a world where there is just too many voices. People are increasingly looking for ways to insert their voice into the conversation. Podcasting allows you to cut through the noise of those voices that exist in the world and bring in your perspective on those issues.
Tell us about your interest in podcasting and storytelling. When did you become interested in podcast and podcasting?
That's an interesting question. So I can't tell you exactly when I became interested in storytelling before podcasting, because I think that it was first storytelling and then podcasting. I grew up listening to stories told by my grandmother and my father, and I came to love hearing these stories. And whenever I listen to stories, I try to think about what the story is really saying to me as a human being, in addition to entertaining. So I picked interest in telling stories, and not just any kind of stories, but stories of ordinary, real people in extraordinary ways, stories about the community where I grew up, stories about the people with whom I work, stories of people who don't have a voice. And then when I studied journalism and discovered podcasts, that I could use this platform to tell stories about these real, ordinary people in an extraordinary way to millions of other people around the world with limited resources, I thought to myself, well, this is something that I must leverage, to make an impact, to lead change in my community, to be able to add my voice to a conversation about a cause that I care about, to tell the story of someone who doesn't have that voice to tell their story.
The podcast masterclass program is now open for application. What makes this program different from the others that are out there?
That's an interesting question, Eva. When I've talked to people about this program initiated by the Leaders of Africa Institute, I've often told them, this is really an incredible opportunity for you to learn new skills. And the question I often get is, but what exactly am I going to be learning? How beneficial is this to me? The first thing that I like to emphasize is the mentorship that this particular podcast masterclass by Leaders of Africa Institute emphasizes, the mentorship that the instructors are going to exercise, they're going to implement with the scholars who register for this masterclass. Because oftentimes when you register for classes like this, you're left on your own, you throw an idea out there, and then perhaps you end up not knowing how to go about that idea. But what's different about this program is that you get to be mentored from day one when the class starts, from pitching your idea to learning the tools that you need to tell the story, to learning the art and science of storytelling, and to learning how to connect with audiences, also how to reach these audiences in their large numbers, and finally, how to make some dollars out of, that story that you're telling. Not that the primary goal is to teach you how to make money off of podcasts, but it's important to, learn how to market the stories that you tell. So I think this is a really interesting or an important component of the masterclass, the mentorship. The other thing is you're going to be learning from really some of the greatest people I've met in terms of storytelling, including myself, in terms of learning the various equipment that you need, because people tend to mystify audio storytelling. They'd be like, oh, I don't think I have the skills. I don't think I have the time to learn. But what this class does is break down those skills, break down the tools using the simplest of the tools such that you're able to use very limited finances, skills, and tools to tell your story and amplify your voice. These are the most important components of this. But to say the least, it's really for free.
Thinking about African podcasts out there, what is your favorite podcast or podcast? And what should we be listening to?
Oh my God, you're trying to put me on the spotlight. So I listen to a lot of podcasts on current affairs, news, current affairs, international affairs, but also I listen to nonfiction storytelling. One of my best African podcasts, and I continue to listen to them up to date. And this is by no means an advert for them, but it's a great podcast. It's called Sound Africa. It's produced out of South Africa by journalists who tell stories about their community. And I remember one of my favorite episodes of that podcast is one called The Heart Problem, where they, in an investigative way, told the story of a South African by name of Hamilton Naki, who some people believe today was ripped of the credit given to Christian Barnard for the first heart surgery done in the world in the 1960s in South Africa. I think that the style that they use in telling stories is incredible. And that's one of the things that is really fascinating to me about podcasts, because it's an audio medium. You are able to craft a story and tell it in a way that someone who's listening to you feels that they are there with you, not just listening to you, but actually experiencing and encountering the characters in your story. Another African podcast that I listen to is called Alibi. It's still a South African podcast, but it's a true crime serial podcast, which tells the story of a man who, after spending more than a decade in prison, now has the chance to make his voice heard, to tell his own side of the story. So these are like the top two African podcasts that I listen to. But of course, there are many other African podcasts that I, once in a while pay attention to. And I'm not including the news, current affairs one, but these are the ones that I really, pay more attention to.
Thank you for joining us, Petrolano. For those of you listening, we hope that you will consider applying to the podcast masterclass program. The program is live and virtual, so you can connect from anywhere. You can expect to receive world-class mentorship needed to launch your podcast idea or refine your ongoing podcast. If you have questions, get in touch with us at institute@leadersofafrica.org. Thank you for listening.